New York City, located in the southern tip of the state of New York, is the most populated city in the United States of America with a population of 8.46 million people spread out across 5 boroughs. In Bronx, you've got the Yankees and Hip Hop. In Queens, you have airports and Spiderman. In Brooklyn, you have Hasidic Jews and Hipsters. In Manhattan, you have billionaires and 99-cent pizza. And in Staten Island, you have, well, I don't know. I don't go out there. New York City is a multicultural metropolis with a global city ranking of Alpha++. Different ethnic communities make up dozens of cultural enclaves such as Little Italy, Chinatown, Koreatown, Little Dominican Republic, Little Guyana, Ukraine Village, and many more. Estimates put the number of languages spoken in New York City at over 600. New York City is characterized by a vast array of art and culture, prominent examples being hip-hop music and breakdancing, Martin Scorsese films, Broadway musicals, and a rich cuisine made up of thin crust pizza, bacon, egg, and cheese sandwiches, bagels and lox, hot dogs, and cheesecake. This is all information you can find out by watching the hundreds of TV shows and movies based in New York City. But now you don't have to. What's up guys, welcome to the video. If you're new here, my name is Ryan and I make videos about my experiences living and traveling in different parts of the world. And for the past year and a half, I lived in New York City. While I'm no expert on the city by any means, and I actually just moved out of New York City, I learned enough during my time there to give you an in-depth breakdown of everything I wish I would have known before I moved to the city. I've broken this video down into 3 sections, those being lifestyle in the city, affordability of New York City, and livability of New York City. And if lifestyle and livability seem like the same thing, then watch until the end of the video and you'll know what I mean. I'll leave timestamps in the description below if there's a certain section of the video you want to jump to. Without further ado, please hit the like button and let's get into it.
Chapter 1. He was too romantic about Manhattan, as he was about everything else.
I feel like everything they say about New York City is true, both the good and the bad. You've probably heard a lot about the energy of New York City.
Can't you just feel the energy?
That is something that you can definitely feel when you're in the city. Anytime you leave your house, you're gonna see something interesting. You're gonna see something out of the ordinary. It does feel like you're in a movie every single day you're in New York City. I don't know how to describe it more than just the city is alive. There's people on the streets and there's constant motion, there's constant noise, and some people love that, some people hate that.
I love this town!
Oh, shut up, you jerk!
It's a big change if you come from like a rural area or the suburbs. There is sort of like, I know it's cliche to say, but like a magic feeling about New York City. You do sort of feel like anything can happen at any time. That could be good or bad, but you do get this feeling that you're like in the center of the world. And I know that might just be my perspective, but you definitely get that buzz of energy when you're living there, because a lot of people who are there, like me when I was living there, are moving there to make something for themselves or to chase an opportunity. But there's a lot of people there who also were just born there and they never moved out. 8 million people is a lot of people, and Manhattan is a tiny island. That's why it's spread out across 5 boroughs. You know, with that many people, you get a lot of good and bad. So I want to talk about something that's good, which is the convenience in New York City.
You can get this stuff at little corner stores called bodegas. Say it with me. Bodegas.
So with all the diversity in New York City, you're bound to find whatever it is you're looking for. Whether that be like rock climbing classes, salsa dancing classes, a hookah bar lounge, a hot massage, goat yoga. These are just examples off the top of my head, but anything exists in New York City. Everything exists. It's all there, available in the city, a lot of times at all hours. Convenience is a huge plus of living in New York City because, yes, it's the city that never sleeps, even though that's cliche. It is true. While the majority of restaurants or businesses do close by like 10 or 11 p.m., there's always something open, and a lot of times there's convenience stores on like every street corner. It can be like 3 or 4 a.m., and you can just leave your apartment and within 10 minutes, you're at a bodega and you can get whatever you want. But that 24-hour convenience means that people have to work late until the night, work all hours of the night. And if you've ever had to work the graveyard shift like I had to last year, then you'll understand why New York City has the reputation of having not the friendliest people. And it's because, you know, working long hours, it makes you grumpy. That's what I'm trying to say here, is that working in the night makes you grumpy. I'm not saying that everyone in New York City is rude or abrasive, but you know, it's a mixed bag. While I'd love to tell you that the stereotypes aren't true and everyone in New York City is actually super nice, unfortunately, they are kind of true. There are a lot of jerks in New York City. I think that's just more a result of there being jerks everywhere, but in New York City, they're just more densely populated. They're just closer together. and so you get more of them on a day-to-day basis. But there's also a lot of nice people, a lot of cool people, a lot of creative people, a lot of funny people, a lot of kind people. It's just a higher concentration of every type of people. It kind of seems like people in New York City are just used to having to fight for their own personal space because people are just so densely packed together. To survive, you have to be assertive, you have to be abrasive, you have to tell people what you want or you won't get what you want. If you're somebody who's more passive, maybe, then it could be sort of overwhelming when you move to the city. But if you live there long enough, the city teaches you how to have boundaries and how to say no, which is super important, because if you don't say no, you'll get taken advantage of a lot in the city, unfortunately. And this could be in subtle ways, like people cut you in line. I've had like the cashiers at grocery stores swipe their card instead of mine. If you just let stuff like that happen, then it'll happen to you. But you have to learn to speak up and not let that happen, and learn to say no a lot, because there are plenty of homeless people in New York City and they will often ask you for money, and sometimes you don't have it and you're not able to help them out. Sometimes you do and you help them out, but you just have to get used to saying no, putting your foot down, and just not letting people walk all over you, because there's unfortunately some people who will do that, or at least try to, in the city. People might also try to take advantage of you in less subtle ways. There's a lot of scam artists in New York City. One scam that I've personally seen was in the 42nd Street subway station in Times Square. So I was walking from one platform to another in the subway station, and out of the corner of my eye, I see these two people collide, bump into each other. What had happened was it looked like they bumped into each other and spilled food on the floor. One of the people was very aggressively berating this other person, telling them that they spilled their food and that they needed to pay them. And it seemed kind of suspicious to me, just like how aggressively this person was berating them, asking them to pay like $40 for a plate of rice. And I looked later on Reddit that this is actually a somewhat common scam where people will purposely bump into you, drop their food, and demand you pay them. So you just have to learn to be aware of those types of things, learn to say no. Not everything is as it appears in New York City. I also think that, at least in my case, a lot of misunderstandings or miscommunication can happen between people in New York City, just because there's so many people from so many different upbringings and so many different cultures. If you're accustomed to a small town where everybody is sort of the same, speaks the same way, is friendly, or at least fake nice, then you're in for a rude awakening in New York City, because not everyone is like that, and not everybody grew up in the same place. So there's a lot of people from different places. They look different from you, they talk different from you, and that's part of the greatness of New York City, that it has that mix of cultures and all these different people from different places, and that gives it the buzz and like the energy that I mentioned earlier. That's what makes it so interesting. I personally couldn't stand living in the same place forever with the same types of people. I love that constant new exciting experience you get when you're living in New York City. So while there are rude people in New York City, I would say the majority are good or neutral. I had neighbors who went out of their way to always greet me and make me feel comfortable, and my roommate Aaron from the Bronx is one of the coolest dudes I know. So there's tons of cool people in New York City, and my New York City experience is not the same as anyone else's. Everyone will have their own individual experience. A lot of it also depends on where you live. So it's a good idea to research different neighborhoods and find out, is it a neighborhood with more families? Are there more, young working professionals living in that neighborhood? Is it a neighborhood with more creatives? Because that will definitely dictate your experience in the city.
Yeah. Money never sleeps, pal.
Next thing I want to talk about is the culture in New York City. And when I talk about the culture in New York City, I'm not talking about the mix of ethnicities. I'm not talking about the art scene. I'm talking about the hustle culture. The grind is real in New York City. Although there are endless opportunities in the city, it can also sometimes feel like that there's endless competition. I moved to the city for work, and it can feel like there's always somebody with better credentials than you, more experience, who's willing to work longer hours for less pay, and that can really mess with your head. And that's a big part of the hustle culture in New York City, is because there's such fierce competition. People go above and beyond and work harder and harder and put more of their self-worth into their work, which is something that can be kind of toxic, but it's also something that is very effective if you want to accomplish a goal. When you see others around you working hard, it motivates you to go the extra mile and work harder and, turn in extra assignments. But it can get to sort of a toxic point where people who live in the city, they actually aren't enjoying all the city has to offer, because their life revolves around work. They're working around the clock, and when they're not working, they're too tired to go out and socialize. So the hustle culture is kind of a double-edged sword. That being said, for those who have an ample enough social battery to actually experience the city and go out often, this city is the best that I've ever experienced in terms of things to do.
The parties were bigger. The shows were broader. The buildings were higher.
You could easily have a different experience every weekend for the rest of your life here, and you wouldn't have to repeat an experience because there's always a new restaurant to try, a new class to take, a new museum to see. And, you know, by the time you would have to repeat an experience and go to the same restaurant, you know, new ones would have opened up. And this is especially fun if you have a partner, because me and my girlfriend visited so many different restaurants and did so many different things while we were both in the city. It was always fun. Every weekend we had something new to do and a new experience to have. So we never ran out of date ideas, and I actually met my girlfriend in New York City. As far as the dating scene in New York City, I've heard it can be kind of rough, but I got lucky. If you're looking for love, it can happen in the city. Aww. And as I mentioned earlier, this city has everything you could ask for, so whatever your hobby is, whatever your happy place is, you can find other people who also share that interest, and that's really awesome for meeting people and making friends. I sort of fell into the toxic work culture, so I didn't meet as many people as I would have liked to while I was living in the city. Don't let that happen to you. Actually experience all the city has to offer, because you could have a great social life in New York City. So New York City is awesome because there's endless things to do, and that's something I've found really lacking in more rural areas where I've lived. There's just not as many things to do. But in those areas, they did have one thing that New York City didn't have, and that was affordability. Which brings me to my next section.
It's a hallway.
It is a beautiful railroad-style apartment in your budget.
It's no secret that New York City is expensive. In fact, it's one of the most expensive cities to live in the world. Rents are much higher than the national average, and everything there comes at a premium. According to different sources, the average rent in New York City is around $4,500 a month. That is twice the amount of mortgages in other parts of the country. For my apartment, I paid $1,200 a month for a shared apartment, 3-bedroom, 1 bathroom, 2 roommates. It wasn't in like the nicest area of the city. It was like a 15-minute walk from the nearest subway, but that price was what I could afford. Obviously, some areas are more expensive than others. You can find anything from a room that costs less than $1,000 a month to $200 million apartments in skyscrapers in the sky. So New York City really has that range of whatever your cup of tea is. Let's talk about the next section of this video, which is eating out.
Oh, God. Oh.
I'll have what she's having.
On a night out in New York City, you're easily spending about $20 on a cocktail, and for dinner for 2, you're easily spending over $100. Even places like Chipotle or McDonald's seem to cost more in the city. There are some cheaper options available. Food trucks are pretty cheap, halal. I've gotten really good deals at local Chinese restaurants, actually. I don't want to know what they put in the food to make it so cheap, but you know, you can get like a General Tso's chicken for like $8. So there's definitely cheap options in the city, and you don't have to always spend so much money, but you sort of feel that you want to because there's so many amazing restaurants. You want to go out, you want to spend money, you want to experience the city. Eating out is one of the best parts of New York City, but it can add up pretty quick. Delivery can be pretty pricey in the city because you're already being charged a premium just for the fact that the restaurant is in New York City, and then on top of that you have a delivery fee, you have a service charge, and you have a tip. So things can get really expensive when you do Uber Eats, but it's very tempting because of the convenience factor. If you're somebody who's health conscious, there's a lot of healthy options in the city like Sweet Green and other like vegan restaurants. And if you're somebody who's worried about your health and likes to take care of yourself, you're probably going to want to get a gym membership.
Come on, come on.
Oh, you're showing me Times Square. This is not touristy at all.
Well, gym memberships in New York City will cost you on average around $100 a month. Of course, there's cheaper options. The cheapest I've found has been Planet Fitness or Blink Fitness, which costs around $15 to $20 a month. And there's more expensive options all the way up to $260 a month at places like Equinox. There's also a ton of free stuff to do in the city. There's a lot of biking and running paths throughout the city, which is really nice if you want to get out and get some exercise without paying for an expensive gym membership. There's also outdoor calisthenics parks where you can get like a street workout. And continuing with the theme of free things to do in the city, there is a ton of free stuff to do in the city. Don't get the impression that you need to spend money, although it's very easy. There are a lot of free stuff to do in the city, and some of the biggest tourist attractions are in fact free, like Central Park and Times Square. is free. Also, the New York Public Library is free, which is super cool. If you're a resident of New York City, you can get discounts or pay as you wish at certain museums, and there's always free museums, free comedy shows, free concerts, free movie screenings, so there's always something to do in the city where you don't have to spend money. A super underrated activity, and which I think is actually the best way to see the Statue of Liberty, is the Staten Island Ferry, which takes you from Lower Manhattan to Staten Island, and you ride right past the Statue of Liberty, and you get a great view, and it's a really fun ferry ride, and it's totally free, and it runs 24 hours a day. In my personal opinion, I think the best time is to go at sunset, and I'm sorry Staten Islanders, I already threw shade at you in the beginning of this video, but honestly, once you get off the ferry, I've seen a lot of people just turn around and get on the next ferry back to Manhattan, so if you don't have any plans or anything you want to go do and see at Staten Island, that's totally fine. There's a lot of people who just ride the ferry back and forth, get the free ride, see the Statue of Liberty, and it's a fun thing to do. Other museums in the city that aren't free will usually cost you like $15 to $30 for the ticket. So New York City has 3 ice hockey teams, 2 basketball teams, 2 baseball teams, 2 football teams, and 2 soccer teams. So if you're a sports fan, you'll always have a game to go see, and usually a ticket can cost you only $40. But whatever your recreational outing is, you'll need a way to get there, and that brings me to my next section, which is transportation.
What the heck was that? Looked like sort of a big turtle in a trench coat. You're gonna LaGuardia, right?
New York City has an extensive public transportation system, which is one of the best in the United States. Although it might not be the most efficient public transportation system in the world, it gets you where you need to go somewhat reliably, and it's pretty affordable. A one-way ticket on the bus or subway will cost you $2.75, although I think they might be increasing that soon. I never found the need to get a weekly or a monthly pass for the bus or subway because I didn't ride that much. I worked remote or hybrid during my time living in New York City, and I tried to do things like ride my bike or walk as much as possible. If you are interested in those passes, they are available. An unlimited week pass will cost you $33, and a monthly pass will cost you $127. But if you pay with your card, you can just tap your card as you get on the bus or as you go into the subway station, and there's a system called Omni which keeps track of every time you tap your card. After you reach, I think, 11 rides, then you automatically don't have to keep paying. So that kind of basically eliminates the need to buy a weekly pass, because if you ride more than 12 times in the same week, it's the same cost as buying a weekly pass. So personally, I don't really see the point in buying a weekly pass because it costs the same either way. Other than subway or bus, you can get a monthly pass to City Bike, which costs around $17, and it lets you take a bike from any location across the city as many times as you want, or you can pay about $5 to rent a City Bike for 30 minutes and then pay 23 cents a minute after the 30-minute mark. Ubers, Lyft, and yellow taxis are pretty comparable in price, but sometimes I've seen Lyfts be a little bit cheaper, and if you're out on the town and you just want to get from like one bar to the next bar, then you might actually save some money with a yellow taxi. But the advantage of Uber and Lyft is that you get to see the calculated price before you accept the trip, which is nice because with traditional cabs, you don't really know how much the trip will cost until you get out of the cab. So I would recommend yellow cabs just for short trips.
I'm not even hungry anymore.
What?
That is why those girls are so skinny.
Oh, no. Give me that. There's like $8 of Jarlsberg in there.
I'll keep this section short because I think prices can vary depending on your diet and preferences, but I'll share that on a bigger shopping trip, I would spend around $150, and if I didn't need to get as much, then it could be as low as $70, but it kind of feels like I couldn't leave my apartment without spending at least $20. There are fruit stands throughout the city where you can buy fresh fruit and vegetables for a cheaper price, but a lot of those fruit stands usually only accept cash, and I never carried cash with me, so I didn't buy there often, but I've heard that the fruit stands in Chinatown are very affordable, so if you're close to Chinatown, you know, that's a good tip. For me, it didn't make any sense to shop there because it was too far. The last section of this video will be about New York City's overall livability. Although New York City is one of the best cities in the world, I do think there are some harsh truths about the city that everyone needs to hear before moving there.
You have an automatic CD?
Sort of.
The first thing is that New York City is dirty. This shouldn't come as a surprise to you, but it was shocking when I first moved to the city. The rats are prolific. There's trash on the sidewalks, and there are no dumpsters in New York City, really, so they kind of just leave their trash on the sidewalk for the trash collectors to come and pick up, which is kind of gross. You have to walk right past it as you're walking down the street, and there's rats running back and forth from underneath buildings to the bags of trash to get a quick meal, and then they run back, and it's not a great system at all that they have there in the city. Pretty gross, and could easily be fixed by like installing some lockable dumpsters or something, and it just doesn't really make sense to me because I don't think it would be that hard to put dumpsters throughout the city. And it's funny because there's a common trope in movies where there's all these like dangerous back alleys in New York City. You'll see Batman like beating up bad guys in an alley, or Spiderman changing behind a dumpster, and the truth is there's not really a lot of alleys in New York City. The buildings are built so close together that there's not really room for any alleys. Also, the cockroaches are really bad in New York City. I think it's a problem in any major city, but just be warned that you will see them and they will be in your apartment. It's almost impossible to avoid them. They're not as frequent in the wintertime, but in the spring and summer, especially after it rains, they'll come out. You'll see them. It's pretty gross, it's uncomfortable, but you know, it's just like another roommate. Granted, I did live in an old building. I don't know what it would be like as far as the cockroach situation in like a high-rise or a new apartment building, but we kept our apartment pretty dang clean, took the trash out every night, wiped out the kitchen counters, washed the dishes, never left any dirty dishes, and we still saw them, so just be warned. And we also had a mouse problem in our apartment that was taken care of, but still, like, it's real. The rodents in New York City are hard to avoid.
You're fast. I'm glad I caught up to you. I waited 5 hours for you. Why is your coat so big? So, good news. I saw a dog today. Have you seen a dog? You probably have.
A big factor of New York City's livability is its outdoor spaces, which I mentioned earlier. Everyone knows about the massive, nearly 1,000 acre park in the middle of the city called Central Park. There are also a ton of other little parks sprinkled throughout the city, which are nice. They give you a little bit of shade, a nice little respite of green in the city, so you're never far from some sort of green space or a basketball court. There's also outdoor gyms and racquetball courts, tennis courts, so that's really awesome that New York City has that built into the city, just like outdoor public spaces, which are really nice and fun to use. So my overall assessment of New York City is that it's a city of extremes. You have endless possibilities, but you also have endless competition. You have tons of cool free stuff to do, but you're also living in one of the most expensive cities in the world. The city is built with people in mind, and if everything worked perfectly, it would be a well-oiled machine. But not everything works perfectly. It's noisy and dirty and lively and cultured. So you have to take the good with the bad in New York City. It's definitely not for everyone, but there are 8 million people living in the city, and 8 million people can't all be wrong. So it's definitely for a lot of people. And if you can get past the grungy exterior and see New York City for the gem that it is, then it's an amazing place. And if you don't get bogged down and let yourself fall into the trap of being a workaholic like I did while I was living there, then you can really have a great time living in New York City, even if you aren't rich. So my one piece of advice for moving to New York City, if you want to get the most out of your experience, is be rich. But if you're not rich, you're going to need a budget. That's why I made this video teaching you step by step how to move to New York City on a budget. But you might have decided you don't want to move to New York City, and if you want to run away to Mexico, here's a video about why everyone is moving to Mexico City. Thank you so much for watching. If you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe, and until the next one, give travel. Bye guys.